Hi everyone and welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast Imola review. I'm here as usual with Freddie and Nigel to dissect a classic blockbuster incident-packed Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. It had a bit of everything, I think anyway. We'll find out the views of Freddie and Nigel. Hopefully this is the last podcast I do ever in my life with this godforsaken haircut. But before we get on to that, two people who've had haircuts now on the pod. I'm the odd one out. It's Freddie.
I've had a hair.
I didn't notice either.
I've had a hair tidy up.
I didn't notice either, Nigel. But how are you both?
Yeah, I think I'm good. Yeah, it was a really good race. Well, yeah, I'm all right. Now, genuinely, Freddie, it doesn't look like you've had a haircut. It looks like you've cut off about 2 centimeters.
That's a haircut. But genuinely, it was a fantastic race. It was really, really good, and it's building up all weekend. The way you had so many mistakes across practice that was just kind of frenetic and exciting. Then qualifying became quite a mad dash that I didn't expect at all. And now it's we've topped it off with a race that none of us could have predicted and didn't. So fair play to Formula One for just being crazy today. Going back to the haircut, because Adam was laughing about it, but it's a tidy up. I now look better, even though I look the same.
I think I was more laughing at Nigel answering the question, how are you, with yeah, which probably happens more, but I just don't notice it. Yeah, so to repeat that, you say no one predicted it. Some of us got pretty close on our predictions, but we can maybe go into that later if we can figure out what they were.
Yeah, maybe we need to start with our predictions, getting a bit more creative on how they end up as said predictions. Like if we say, oh, Verstappen wins, we have to say, and he leads every lap or something, or like Norris gets on the podium, but he qualifies third, but has his lap deleted because of track limits, and then has to race through, and then it's team ordered by his teammate and all of that. Maybe we should start saying that for the Portuguese Grand Prix.
I think we should probably look at.
Let me get more
once
points.
Once we're at the stage where we're getting 3 out of 3 every week, then we can probably go up. But
very good point.
Until then, I think off the top of my head, I think I had Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez, but I did have Norris to finish third in Bahrain. So if you combine the two, then I'm winning.
No. Yeah, I think I had Norris to finish third next week, so for the next race. So yeah, I'm going to take that.
No, that's just ridiculous. Anyway, but let's start with Verstappen because he won. Spoilers. He led every lap, as Freddie said. It was a really, really strong performance, I think, from him. But how strong a performance do you think it was over the weekend?
I don't think it was as good as Bahrain, but I think his Sunday was probably better than Bahrain, I'd say. His start was absolutely incredible. I think did he start second gear? I think he did.
Yeah, he did.
And yeah, he was super aggressive on Hamilton. Hamilton knew that was going to be a vital part of the race, and so did Verstappen. And Verstappen came out on top. Did get investigated, didn't it? Or got noted. Well, I thought there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. And from there, Verstappen was pretty flawless. He dropped it on the second safety car restart, but other than that, he was in a league of his own. And I think it makes up for Bahrain, which he should have won. You could probably say Hamilton should have won this race, but instead Verstappen has. And I think weirdly, the 2 races that have happened so far, the winner probably shouldn't have won it, kind of thing. But yeah, it was a fantastic drive, and and I thought as well, especially on Friday when he had the drive shaft issue, that he might be in a little bit of trouble. Got out qualified as well, but it's what counts on Sunday, isn't it? And he definitely made the most of it with that brilliant start.
Yeah, no one had a flawless weekend, and we can't say that about Max. Definitely not. But he was near to it. I mean, yeah, his qualifying in third was actually was when you look at it, not good, really, considering he did that basically from a scruffy start to the lap. And it was his own mistake that put him there. But the way he recovered from that, a second gear start is ballsy. And he pulled it off. And like Nigel says, I completely agree that his ferocious start was excellent. And it's exactly what he needed to do. And he got one over on Hamilton, recovered from the fact that he'd been out qualified by Perez straight away. And for the most part, didn't look back. I mean, I think there are a few things that could, like everything you're going to say, for me at least, say about his race is pernickety things, is like nitpicks on, like maybe he could have done his first safety car restart a little bit closer to the line because he opened Hamilton up to a good slipstream. But he learned from that later on for the rolling restart after the red flag. And obviously we're going to say, oh, he probably warmed his tires a bit aggressively at that restart, but he caught it and carried on, and was lucky that
he was really warming them up.
Yeah, he was just really warming them up. He was lucky that Leclerc didn't probably rightfully go past him and take the lead at that point, because I really thought Leclerc probably could have done that legally and got away with it. But I think we might touch on that later. Who knows? But yeah, I think Verstappen really deserved to win. I know you said there, Nigel, that the driver who won didn't deserve to win necessarily, or didn't deserve, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think Verstappen didn't steal this race from anyone. I think this was his race, whereas Hamilton, you could argue, stole Bahrain a bit more.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one with Verstappen, because he kind of had half a race, and then basically from the red flag onwards, he was kind of free. Hamilton was out, and he was free to kind of poople off into the distance. But he earned that right because he was so strong on the first stint, or the first half of the race, and he put pressure on Hamilton. And I think Red Bull got the pit stop from intermediates to dry spot on, and then Mercedes, I think they got the lap wrong, as well as obviously messing up the pit stop.
Oh, really?
I think if the pit stop had been 3 seconds rather than 4, which is still a slow pit stop, Hamilton I think would have been in the lead there. I think it was the crossover was about halfway around the lap for when Lewis was out and when Verstappen was coming over, and I think Verstappen got caught behind one bit of traffic, which makes me kind of think maybe Mercedes. And I mean, yeah, I think it was probably lucky that Mercedes were that lap, but I think that would have been the perfect lap to stop when Hamilton stopped, personally. But I mean, it's finite margins.
I think it was about, off the top of my head, I think it was about a 2.5 second gap when kind of Verstappen overtook Hamilton coming out the pits, and then immediately that gap ballooned out to a few more seconds as Hamilton kind of warmed up. And yeah, the pit stop was about 2 seconds longer, so it would have been very close. But I think Red Bull nailed that, and Max's driving was just able to put Hamilton under pressure, and he got held up lapping the drivers that Hamilton ended up spinning out behind, and Verstappen took that a bit more cautiously, which is a very mature thing to do, I think. Maybe it was because he had that buffer, but he took it a bit more cautiously, overtaking those. And then Hamilton needed to make up time. He tried to, just go in a bit too aggressively on, I think, Russell, and that was what led to him spinning out on the, getting tipped into the gravel, going on the wet part of the track.
I think Red Bull in that situation with a pit stop, they were kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because Hamilton would have just done the opposite. And I think had the Mercedes, had it been a 2 second stop, I think it would have been neck and neck. I think Verstappen on warmer tyres would have had a pretty good chance of mugging Hamilton, even if Hamilton was, say, side by side or alongside or whatever. So I think Red Bull probably got it right. But and that was a seriously tense moment of the race, and I don't know about I was pretty like, wow, this is the moment, and yeah, it was fantastic, and those are the kind of things that we missed out on last year quite a lot, I feel. But already in the 2 races we've had this year, strategy, pit stops have played their part. I think it's really made the races a lot more exciting at the front of the race.
You were really. You were really right about him earning the race from that first stint, because the way they then went round and the way Hamilton closed up just before the pit stops was because Verstappen had given himself that buffer of traffic, like you said, and he had gone balls to the wall on the first 2 laps of racing after the safety car from the start, and he had built a 3-second gap to Hamilton after that first lap and built that by a second and a half the next lap, and then just stayed there and matched the time going on and used that time to get through traffic and put the pressure on Hamilton to get through traffic, like you said. And it was fantastic that he did that. He had the control, obviously, of being in first, and having rattled with the pace he had shown early on, he had pace to spare, even if Hamilton was closing. So even if Verstappen ended up behind, it wouldn't have been over there, I don't think.
Yeah, I think I'd give him my driver of the day in our semi-regular / I don't know, we don't do it every race,
No.
But I think he'd get that for me. On to Hamilton then. We'll find out what Nigel thinks later. Moving on to Hamilton, do you think it's? I'm quite interested to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think it was a good or bad race for Lewis? Or more good or more bad?
I think that's the thing. It was both, wasn't it? I think, Nigel, you would probably say something similar. You just said more good than bad because it's one mistake, but the mistake causes it to be worse. Like, whatever it is, 62 laps were great and 1 lap wasn't, but it's that 1 lap that was really bad.
Well, you could say that for Nikita Mazepin every race, but it doesn't make a difference.
All right. Yeah, but I don't mean it like that. I mean it like he was really good on those laps. You're just being a twat.
I think, personally, I do think he was lucky. I think, first of all, his qualifying lap was stunning. I think it was one of the best pole position laps, probably in the turbo hybrid era from Hamilton, because his gap to Bottas was quite large. About 4/10, split first to 8th, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that kind of went under them. It was kind of an underrated lap, perhaps, and it was brilliant. They got pole position, lost it at the start, couldn't do much. But though he was coming at Verstappen, I think he had more pace. And for me, I think he was fortunate that the error he made didn't affect him more in terms of points, because with the red flag, obviously he got his lap back with the safety car, and I don't know. I just feel I do feel he was fortunate in a way to be in that position. I feel.
Yeah, you're right. It was because of the red flag that he was able to get unlapped and rebuild the car carefully, and also the safety car enabled him to drop to 9th or 8th, not to 15th or whatever, when he was trawling around with half a front wing. So he was lucky in that regard, but it ruined his chance of the win, frankly, and that's what he's got to look at, really.
I think his comeback drive was phenomenal, but I think he was lucky. I'll say that. I think he was really good, but lucky.
I think that's it for me. I think I've started writing my winners and losers piece, and I put him as a loser because I think it was a track that Mercedes looked the stronger on. I think Nigel alluded to earlier, and to not come away with a win from that is, I imagine for him it will be disappointing. But like you say, the recovery drive was phenomenal, and there's not many drivers, I think, on the grid that could have done that to that extent. But the flip side is he did that from a position that he'd kind of put himself in by making the mistake, and benefited from the look. As you said, Nigel's raised his finger twice now at me, so I'll let him speak.
It's a question. Why did you put Verstappen as a winner in Bahrain then? Isn't this the same thing with Hamilton?
I think I put Red Bull as a winner in Bahrain.
Okay.
Well, if you look about it, Red Bull's position now, there.
I think it was Red Bull. I put Red Bull as a winner in Bahrain because it was confirming the hype.
Yeah.
It was kind of more to do with that, but yeah.
For me, it's a similar thing, except I think Hamilton got away with not scoring single-digit points due to the due to the safety car red flag, because really he shouldn't have been higher than 7th or 8th, I think, if it was because he was lapped. So he got lucky with that. But like I said, his comeback drive was quite incredible because it is such a difficult track to overtake on, and to be able to follow the cars within a second. Yes, his car might be slightly faster, but compared to other drivers, his ability to follow and then get the moves done by staying within 6 or 7 tenths coming off the final corner, it's just clinical, really. So yeah, I think he has to get high praise on that. Just one of those rare errors. And if this is his worst race, if this is his one bad race of the season, which he tends to have, then yes, it was lucky, but he can't really ask too more, I don't think.
Yeah, it was really impressive that even that he got lucky to be able to be 8th at the restart, with Kimi Raikkonen spinning straight out after the red flag under the safety car and all of that, giving him a position, and then having to only really fight Stroll, Ricciardo, Sainz, Leclerc, and Norris, which are all significantly slower cars. The fact that he still was able to close on them in such a rate, obviously we saw the pace of the Ferraris and the McLarens, and particularly Norris throughout this weekend. They've been actually stunningly quick, particularly through bits of the track where you can't follow so easily. So the fact that Hamilton was able to just go to another level in his closure, in his recovery and closure on those cars was really good. But yeah, it all comes back to he was only able to do that because of a massive crash that brought out a safety car and a red flag, and only had to do that because he was too eager in lapping George Russell. George Russell didn't do anything wrong in the lapping. There was a few nods to that, and it was just he got out of the way at the first opportunity and slowed down. Hamilton had to just go up the inside and went a bit too keen, really, frankly. He knew he was offline on new slicks, so you would take that cautiously, but yeah.
My last point is, I was going to say, I think Hamilton has had quite a bit of fortune this season, in the 2 races so far, with the track limits effectively getting away with that. I know he was allowed, but then he wasn't allowed, kind of thing. And then now this, so I think the fortune has gone his way so far, I'd say.
I think it's kind of 50-50 with me. I think he's had these, he has had breaks, but on the flip side, he's then exploited those breaks to the maximum. He got 19 points here, which was when he was down in 9th or 8th, then that was the most he could have got from it. And in Bahrain, he still had to complete the rest of his laps and keep Verstappen behind him. And to be honest, I think if you're a driver in such a close fight and you see, an area in terms of track limits where you can gain time that's allowed, you should do that. But to come out of this leading the championship on 44 points aptly is phenomenal, really. And I think it's that. I think he's had breaks, but how many drivers get those breaks and then don't take them with both hands? Or you look at where Bottas started, and his race did nothing before his crash, which we'll get onto very shortly. So yeah, it's these moments that just do make you realise how good a driver he is, that when he's not starting on pole and disappearing off into the lead by half a second every lap, then he shows his class even more, I think. And
he's still getting pole, and that's unbelievable. He did not deserve that pole out in that car. That pole was fantastic.
When he went off, I just thought, I thought, we'll finish second. But I wouldn't think for probably any, apart from maybe Verstappen, really? I wouldn't think for any other driver. Yeah, I still
I did not think that.
Second.
I thought he was going to DNF.
So did the graphics people. It said out on the timing tower.
To be fair, once he got back onto track, I did have flashbacks. But
once he got back on track and you saw the wing hanging off, and that he was in 7th, he was already in 7th when he came back on track. If he had got back on track in like 4 seconds, maybe, and the wing wasn't that bad, but because he was on track so far down with the wing hanging off on slick tires going slowly around cold slick tires and what's still damp parts of the track, right? You could have so easily spun it again in that situation. He could have, particularly if he was rushing to go back to the pits. I mean, it was probably 10 seconds until he was under safety car deltas with that. So like he could have, if he was pushing, could have dropped that and had a bigger crash, frankly. And he did a really, really good job to drive that car. I mean, they all do fantastic jobs to drive damaged cars, but yeah, he did. That was good.
Two drivers that weren't able to drive off the damage to their cars, though, was Valtteri Bottas and George Russell. It was a big collision, kind of going down the start-finish straight on Tamburello. And I mean, firstly, glad that both of them were able to get out okay, but that wasn't the big story coming from it, because George Russell took a great dislike to Valtteri Bottas's antics, if you could call it that. I don't know whether I would, but his behaviour leading up to the crash, and he called it dangerous driving and seemed to imply that Bottas was targeting him somewhat.
Yeah.
So yeah, what were both of your thoughts on the crash?
And Nigel and I have already had a tete-a-tete where I think it's predominantly racing incident, and he thinks there's a predominant blame, I think. So
I think it's Russell's fault, personally. I mean, I think he's just misjudged it, kind of like Hamilton misjudged it. I think, obviously, you go at a super high speed, and I just think he's made a tiny error with huge consequences, I think. Because I think Bottas has left him enough, or more than enough space.
yes,
I think Russell has just caught the line and unfortunately hit him. So I think for me, it's 100% on Russell.
See, I don't think it goes 100% on Russell based on the nature of the track at that point. But I think, yeah, it's Russell's mistake that's put him into Bottas. I don't think there was any jolts or sharp movements from Bottas, because if you look at where Bottas is, he's not making jolts or sharp movements. He's following the natural dry line of the track. And when he gets to that point, Russell is more than a car length, is not alongside him for the most part. So for me, with that, I agree with you, Nigel. It's predominantly on Russell, but he's leaving appropriate room at 300 kilometers an hour to the left of him, to where Bottas is, to kind of like judge where Bottas is, because he can't see him at that point. So he's got to kind of judge that. But by looking to the left, he's just dipped it onto the right ever so slightly onto the grass. And that's flung him round. And I think that's racing instancy, to be honest, to me.
If I was a steward, I'd be given a 10 grid players penalty.
Really?
Yeah.
I think
proper racing incident to me.
I think that would be quite harsh. I think it's a racing incident that's Russell's fault. He's not tried to be aggressive towards Bottas or anything like that. It's it is his fault because he loses control and then hits Bottas. But I don't think he does that because of any kind of bad or premeditated plan to try and squeeze Bottas. It reminds me a bit. Yeah, it reminds me a bit of, without wanting to stir up another past controversy, the 2019 Canada kind of if Hamilton had carried on around the side and not kind of backed off and Vettel had hit him, and I thought of it like that if Vettel had gone into the side of Hamilton because he lost control and then came back onto the track, then it would have been the same apportioning of blame, but equally you wouldn't say it was Vettel. It was a nasty move from Vettel, which
that's a hard one. It's a hard one to compare to based on the natures of the moves being at 20 kilometers an hour and at 250, 300 kilometers an hour. But I know what you mean on the sentiment of it's unintentional, but it's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it can't be. Oh, go on. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say, like the Vettel thing is obviously one of those really weird ones. But this is like, you can clearly see what's happened. You can clearly see that you can hear the sharp uptake in wheel spin from a tap of the driving tire on the cold, wet grass. Only just as well. For the most part, he's still on the track. But like, that's the risk you take doing an overtake in that part of the track. It's a narrow track. We know this. We know it's hard to overtake. And the reason it's hard to overtake is because it's hard to get a car alongside. So if you're going to have a car alongside, then you're going to be putting yourself at risk of tapping the grass, aren't you? So he's done that. He's going really fast. And yeah, he would be a worse racing driver if he lifted, but that's how it is, isn't it? I think. I don't know. I don't know any other way to look at it than that's how it is.
For me, if it's clearly someone's fault, which I do think it is in Russell's case, I think you have to get a penalty. I don't see how you can call it a racing incident if it's clearly someone's fault. Why is it
always having to be a blame? It's not like he's it's not like he's done something stupid in his driving. He's driven basically fine. He's controlling a car. You can see him twitching it at 300 kilometers an hour, and like it's just a slight tap onto the grass, which is what it is.
I think you've got to have some thought for the intention, because I think there is zero chance that Russell was trying to play hardball or intending to put either of them in a position where they might crash. It's just he's lost control. He's made a small error going a bit too far to the right, and then he's lost control.
To be fair, I know what you're saying, Nigel. I know what you're saying. Yeah, and it does make a lot of sense that, yeah, this has happened because of an action from George Russell. And if we take it back to the Canada thing, say this has happened because of a mistake from Vettel and all of that, and like you didn't want the mistake and you put yourself at the risk by driving to do the mistake. And you say look at Lando Norris in qualifying, he deserved to have that time deleted because yes, he did disobey the rules when he went wide at Piratella. So it does make sense thinking about it logically that if you're going to have something where there's a mistake causing something, then it's a natural penalty. If you look at it from that kind of perspective, it's really hard to kind of determine. Then you kind of need to think, so should everything, if there's a little mistake that impacts another person, is that determined always a massive penalty?
I have to be careful with what I say here, but I can't help but feel that because it's Russell, people aren't saying, oh, that was stupid, that was silly. And I feel because it is Russell, people are just kind of letting him get away with it. But for me, it's a clear error.
I think that's because he's got a lot of credit built up in the bank. I think they're not.
Of course. But he still made a mistake.
Yeah, but it's again. I think it was an innocent mistake, and it was a mistake that was kind of to do with his own car rather than the way he was racing Bottas. I think.
I'm coming down to your perspective a bit more, Nigel, now, because I'm kind of thinking of there's no logical way to defend a mistake.
If you make a mistake,
allow other things to be
another driver, you should be penalised. That's my take for every incident. If there's a clear mistake,
his penalty was slamming into the wall and ending the race.
That's also a good point. His penalty was a crash for himself. That is a very good point. What do you see on that, Nigel? Like he didn't gain an advantage.
Still 10 grid because it's his fault.
So you give 2 penalties to people for stuff like that.
Why 2?
No. Then what if he gets to carry on? If he carries on the race, does he get a penalty in the race and then afterwards?
Instead, you get a drive-through or whatever.
It's one penalty because the penalty of him crashing isn't taken into account because another car has crashed. If that makes sense, he's being penalised. He's being penalised for the other car crashing, not for himself crashing into it.
I'm saying that himself crashing is the penalty. Enough penalty needed because he makes a mistake and he pays for it by slamming into the wall and ending his race and ending a good chance at points, which I think he would have had.
He probably would have had points.
I can't agree with that because otherwise, like Michael Schumacher in 2012 in Spain, he got a 5 grid place penalty for Monaco for hitting Bruno Senna, and that was right because he made a mistake and like he didn't get to start in pole position in Monaco. So you have to take some kind of proper penalty as well as, retiring.
Yeah, I think for me, again, it comes down to the difference between, a kind of intentional aggressive driving and one that was just some mistake. And I think in this situation, in a lot of situations like this, Russell's penalty is that his race is over. I think if he's...
How many incidents have there been in the past where drivers intentionally tried to do something?
I don't mean that. I mean trying to squeeze someone or, push them out to the outside, or
then he's
whatever.
intentionally gone for the overtake. Then does that not come into it? Like,
no,
if he's intentionally gone for the overtake, he's intentionally putting his car alongside another car on a wet track. Is that not the equivalent of a defensive take on it?
He's not crashed into Bottas directly because of what he's done. He's crashed because
he has.
Yeah, it's because he's tried to overtake him.
No, you don't kind of understand what I'm saying. Like, he's not crashed into Bottas because he steered into Bottas. He's crashed because he's made a mistake in terms of his car positioning independently, lost control, and then hit Bottas as a result of that. So he's crashed. If he steers in,
say he did steer into Bottas, say it was on turn-in and he steered into Bottas there, would that be also a mistake in car positioning? Is that just in a different... So say
that.
So you say he didn't steer into Bottas, and that would be a penalty. But like, if he did steer into Bottas and it was an unintentional steer into it was just a mistake in car positioning, is that then not? Is that the same as this? Because it was just a mistake in car positioning, him steering in. This is like the equivalent of that, surely, anyway, because it's still a mistake in car positioning
if it happens. But I think ultimately he's being penalised by his race being over. I don't think you need to add on to that because of a mistake, a mistake that he made.
In football, if you make a tackle or something, you might get a yellow card, but you will also give away a free kick and a penalty. So it's like a double whammy there as well. Isn't this the same thing?
But no.
Why?
Well, because for starters, F1 is totally different to football in pretty much every way, shape, or form.
It's a hard comparison to make, but I think
in football,
we're going to get nowhere. Guys, we're going to get nowhere with this. But I mean, like, yeah, obviously we all know our perspectives. And it's kind of Nigel's clearly thought of something that he's going to say now that will potentially, he thinks he'll win him this debate. Go, Nigel.
It's just a yes or no.
Moving on to Ferrari. No, sorry.
It's do you think it's Russell's fault? Yes or no?
Yes.
So why isn't it a penalty then?
We've literally spent the last 10 minutes. That's why Freddie said to move on.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's one of those ones where like there's blame on both sides. The predominant blame is on one side, yes, and it's understandable if there's a penalty on that side, but it's also understandable if it's a racing incident because of both things you've both said. And that's the nature of subjective stewardship in Formula One, and that's an issue we should discuss in the future dates because it is a bad issue. But that's the position we're in. That's the position we can have this debate, and we can have this debate. And a racing incident is the correct outcome, but it's like a grid penalty could also be the correct outcome. We're in a position with Formula One where you can have lots of correct and incorrect outcomes that are all different and the same, and that's ridiculous. But like, we're not going to solve it here. And let's move on to Ferrari, like Adam said, because they did have a good weekend.
They had a quietly good weekend. I think it was all about Norris and Hamilton coming up through the field at the end. And it was like, oh, Ferrari actually had a really good race and scored 22 points. And it's kind of refreshing to see them on the front foot, and Leclerc especially, and Sainz as well, are drivers that should be kind of battling around the top five, and Leclerc should be battling on the podium. And I think it's great to see them up there. But the question I want to ask is, how do you kind of assess Sainz's start? Because he is a bit off Leclerc so far, I think. Is that to be expected, or do you think it's been the start that would have been expected, or below expectations? Or
for me, I've been surprised how close he has been to Sainz. I think he's just bottled it when it comes to it in qualifying, but every other point he's as good as Leclerc. Like Bahrain, say Q1 and Q2, he's as good as Leclerc, but Q3 he made a mistake in his run. This weekend, Q2 he makes a mistake in his run, but other than that, he's matched Leclerc with pace straight out the bat all weekend. And in the race, it's similar things. He made a few mistakes off the bat, but later on he was a little bit off Leclerc. But other than that, up to the flag, they're pretty much matching, maybe 2 seconds off, and that's really good. So I think there's teething troubles to get on top of, but I think in a few races' time, he'll be on very good par with Leclerc.
I think he's been excellent, quite frankly. I think he's been the best driver who's changed teams over the winter. I think he's been the best out of the whole lot, personally.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think he was lucky today in Imola because he made quite a few errors across the gravel track. But I think he's similar to Hamilton in that boat where the safety car red flag situation kind of helped him a bit. He was also helped
saved.
Gasly was causing a
Gasly's
huge strain early on. Yeah.
Stubbornness.
Yeah. But I think for me, Sainz has been the best driver in a new team, and he's up against Leclerc, who, for me, is like top 3, top 4 driver. And I think he's definitely been close enough. In the Bahrain race, looking back, he was only 8 seconds behind Leclerc, having had a lot more traffic in the race, because whereas Leclerc was only behind Norris throughout it, so I'd had to overcome positions. And I think in Imola, he was kind of right there again. I don't think he's that far off, and I think he's doing a great job personally.
Looking at his race today, he made a couple of mistakes, but he got he had the capacity to make those mistakes, yes, because of where other cars were further down the midfield. But he was in the position to be ahead of them from a demon start, coming from wherever he was 11th up to sort of 7th at the start. How he weaved his way up to there, I don't know. But he did and got up there somehow and carried on with that. And then the pace he was able to catch Ricciardo on was fantastic. And then he was able to stick with Norris and Leclerc in the dry second stint of the race. And I thought, fantastic job. Because, you've recovered your race and you've earned the recovery drive like that, if that makes sense. He's recovered and he's done well once he's recovered.
I think like you said previously, no one had a flawless weekend. And Leclerc made 2. He spun twice at Aqua Minerale, once on the formation lap and once kind of a few laps in, or maybe even on the first lap, or he went off.
No, I don't think he spun on the first.
No, it
lap.
might not have been spins, but he had.
I think okay, yeah, because his first he definitely did on the formation lap. I can't. Yeah, he might have had a few offs later on, but his first lap was fantastic. The way he was able to get past Perez after he made a slight mistake, his traction he got there was unbelievable. And then to hold it in the podium positions all the way to like lap 50, or like 52 or 3 or whatever it was when Hamilton overtook him, was really good. I was really impressed with the fact that, if you think about it, Leclerc was on the podium for like 5/6 of that race, basically. The 2/3, whatever, I can't figure it out. 5/6 of the race, not 2/3. Well, yeah, but yeah. So for the most part, Leclerc was top 3 material of this race, and I think he deserved a podium today, and he didn't get one.
The man who was on the podium for the sixth of the race was Lando Norris, who we've not talked about yet because we got so distracted with penalties. But what a fantastic result for Norris! And I think for me, coming into the season, and there's still a long way to go, but I was worried for him because I thought Ricciardo looked very good. And he'd gone to Renault and made that his own team pretty quickly. And so far, Norris, he came out pre-season and said, this is my team, and, made quite confident statements about how he viewed the team. And so far, he's backing up those with his performances, and a fantastic 3rd place today. Could have been 2nd.
Yeah, phenomenal. Absolutely. He's driving the wheels off that McLaren. He is in sensational form. I think there was something on Twitter a few days ago where Adam posted a reply saying who's been the most overrated driver, and Adam posted something, and I said it was Norris. I think Adam said, "Why do you think it was Russ?" But anyway, my answer to like the most overrated driver who's changed your mind, I put Norris or something, and he's. Huh?
Sorry, what?
Oh, so I thought you were saying something to me. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I was just mouthing things. Sorry, carry on.
No, but you make a good point, Nigel. Norris has, and you do, Adam. Norris has had it up against him coming into this season, and he's done everything right. And if the only thing wrong with your season today is 3 inches at Piratella, then fair play to you. And that's what it is. That's all that's wrong with it.
Why are you laughing?
The name of the film.
So immature.
For me, he was driver of the day by far. Driver of the weekend by far.
I ain't driver of the weekend, yeah.
He was, I can never give anyone a 10 out of 10, but I'll give Norris a 9 out of 10,
Yeah, for the qualifying.
Yeah,
qualifying mistake.
To get only half a tenth off pole is phenomenal, especially if you look at where Ricciardo is. Yes, Ricciardo's still bedding into the team, but it is Daniel Ricciardo after all, 7-time race winner, someone we all rate very highly. And Norris is just driving the wheels off that McLaren, and he is doing superbly. We can't ask for much more, and he thoroughly deserves his second podium of his Formula 1 career after Austria last year.
What you look at is the fact that Lando Norris at the end of the race was 23 seconds, nearly 24 seconds off Verstappen. Ricciardo was 51 seconds off Verstappen. So the gap between Ricciardo and Norris was bigger than the gap from Norris to the lead. And that is after however long was the second sort of stint of the race, about 28, 29 laps.
About halfway, yeah.
That's a second a lap, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the way when they swapped Ricciardo and Norris, I think Norris was 2 seconds quicker after like 5 laps. So I think he had a 10-second gap after 5 or 6 laps for Ricciardo. So in the wet as well, in the trickier conditions, he's clearly much happier, but also in the dry conditions as well.
He's from Britain. There's not much rain in Australia. But I think that swap, again, we saw it last year at Styria, I think, with Sainz letting Norris through, and that really benefited both drivers. And again, I think the way McLaren seem to handle these does seem, and apart from Netflix creating a battle between them, it seems to be really good. And I think there just seems to be a lot of harmony in that team. And that was what kind of released Norris to make his progress, because it could have been, frustrating 3, 4, 5 laps stuck behind Ricciardo saying, why isn't he letting me through? But it wasn't. They just got the switch done, and Ricciardo didn't argue, and that's best for both of them, because you'd imagine there might be a point in the season where Ricciardo will benefit from that arrangement as well. So
Ricciardo still finished 6th, and that's still a good performance. So it's still good points for the team. I think, what is it, similar 22, did you say, for Ferrari? Is that 23 for McLaren then? So that's still one more than Ferrari, and that's what they needed, to be honest. At this stage in the season, that's what you need. And I think Ricciardo is a driver who can grow a bit. He's obviously got space to grow in the car. He's only been in it 2 races, and you look at the way he grew in his first season at Renault. Like, he went from sort of on par to then dominating Hülkenberg and then trouncing Ocon. So I think there's space to come from Ricciardo, and Norris is obviously just still learning as a young driver. Definitely not a rookie. 3rd season, that's mad. But he's definitely needs, if he can carry this form through the next few races, that's fantastic. Because where Norris sort of got let down last time was he had really good opening to the season and then sort of tailed off for the middle of the season, then came back in the last race basically. So if Norris can just have these peaks throughout the season, then that's one of the drivers you fear. Like, and that's I only think of that with Hamilton, Leclerc, and Verstappen. So I find that ridiculous that Norris is up there at that stage at the start of the season, but he is.
I'll probably throw Ricciardo into that mix as well. But yeah, it's quite.
Not Russell.
I mean, yeah, maybe.
More scared of him now.
Apparently he's overrated. That's what I had someone say. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
But the driver that we thought would have that podium spot, or I think we all put him on the podium, me and Freddie put him 3rd, was Sergio Perez. And it was a really up and down weekend for him. How do you assess it?
As our resident Red Bull number 2 driver correspondent, Nigel, please, the floor is yours.
Hero to 0. That's, I think, how I would sum it up. Hero in terms of being the first driver to beat Verstappen since 2018 in Abu Dhabi with genuine pace in qualifying. First front row, did a phenomenal job. The mistake in the final corner cost him pole position, but we can't ask for more really when Verstappen isn't quite on it. You have to be there to capitalise, and that's exactly what Perez did on Saturday. But then, it just didn't quite happen. And his wet, he didn't have the best start, did he? Because he dropped behind Leclerc, but then he was starting to come to him on the intermediates. But It was just one of those cases where he made a mistake at a crucial time with the pack bunched up after the restart, and then he fell to the back, and then he just fell apart after that. He made a couple more errors. But I guess it's a fantastic sign that the pace is there and that he is ready to capitalise on when Verstappen isn't at his best in qualifying, because Perez isn't even the best qualifier. So I think it's very encouraging. It's just he didn't get the result from it, unfortunately. But I'd fully expect him to iron out these mistakes.
Yeah, it was a weird one for him because it's a weird mistake for Red Bull to make to let him overtake cars under the safety car at the start. And that penalty seemed to sort of capitulate a bit, but he was thrown a lifeline with the red flag and he was fourth of that restart. And realistically, it should have been a Red Bull 1-2 from there. And you're right, the mistakes, I don't know whether it got to him that he was fourth and he shouldn't have been fourth. I don't know whether he got that pressure kind of got to him, but either way, he spun at Villeneuve and ended up 14th as a result of that, and couldn't get back to the points and made quite a few little scrappy errors, trying to get back onto the tail end of some cars in the dry section of the race, which is a massive shame for Checo. And it was kind of it did become a bad performance for him after what was a brilliant performance yesterday and a good comeback in Bahrain. But yeah, he didn't execute the race well, frankly, and that's kind of all you got. I can say to that
safety car mistake as well. I forgot about that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the mistake's obviously on him, but overtaking two cars, that's
brain fade
from everyone. Like they showed the onboard of that, and it looked like Gasly slammed on the anchors to let him back pass. And which forced Ricciardo to let him back. Ricciardo was all like, "Oh well, he's gone off. I'm going to carry on." And then, Ricciardo, Gasly braked really hard and was like, "Oh no, we've got to let him back through." And Ricciardo had nowhere to go because he couldn't overtake Gasly. So that all just felt a bit weird to me. And that's the story of Perez's afternoon. Frankly, just a bit odd. He's a better driver than that.
Anchors, let us know on Twitter at WingingItF1. But yeah, I think if you look at that 3 points or 4 points that Hamilton's gained off of Perez mistake, and last race Bottas was able to nick 1 point with the fastest lap off Verstappen. So it's those type of things that will add up.
Yeah.
But again, it's only 2 races in. There'll be a lot more of those ups and downs over the season, and especially this season more than others, hopefully anyway, unless it all
You're right.
goes off a cliff from here. Anything else to say on Perez?
Just a missed opportunity for me. Go on, Freddie.
Yeah, that's the similar thing for me. It is a missed opportunity, but he's proven that to himself, at least on Saturday, that he can be up there and he deserves to be up there. And he's proven it on Sundays in the past. And what he's got to do is kind of not let today's poor performance get in the front of his head, because he's had really positives that he should take from this weekend, and he really should take those positives from the weekend, that he has qualified legitimately on the front row and he had the pace for pole. So yeah, he should take that to Portimao, and hopefully he will. He's a mature driver. He knows what to think and when to think it. So
I think if it gets in front of his head, it will be quite hard to see in Portimao. So hopefully that does not happen to him. A bit like the Halo, but less protective and less thin. I don't know. AlphaTauri had maybe really disappointing.
Yeah, really thick. Yeah.
And AlphaTauri had a disappointing weekend. I think we both thought they'd be right up there in the top 5. I think I put Tsunoda as kind of a dark horse for a top 4, top 5 spot, and someone else like Gasly. But they just didn't seem to be on the. They never kind of seemed to be, pushing the top of the pace all weekend. At least to me. I think it might have done in practice, but
they were on the pace, and Gasly was 5th in qualifying, which got completely forgotten about because of obvious reasons from McLaren. And I think it was more. Tsunoda just couldn't get his weekend started, unfortunately. But with Gasly, it was more the strategy, I think, let them down. If he had started on the Inters, then that could have been a completely different story of the day. Because I think there was the pace in the AlphaTauri, at least in Gasly's hands this weekend.
I think it says a lot about how crazy a race it was that I'd forgotten that he started on wet.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nigel.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think Gasly was one of the best drivers in terms of driver performance, and I think the team just let him down massively with the strategy. I think to get back to eighth was pretty good as well. Yes, he also got some help with the safety car and red flag, but yeah, I think it's a similar story to Bahrain where AlphaTauri could have got double figure points, and I think it could have been the same here. I think with Gasly and Tsunoda as well. It's his first big mistake, I'd say, wasn't it, in qualifying when he
Couple
crashed?
of them, yeah.
But then he also crashed after. Well, he overtook Hamilton, didn't he, on the restart somehow? I don't think they showed it, but he overtook him, and then he dropped by himself, unfortunately. So yeah, I think Tsunoda's probably he was one of the worst drivers in Imola, unfortunately, but he is a rookie, of course, and it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back, or if he bounces back.
I mean, if he doesn't bounce back, he can always go and make some songs with Traffic Paradise.
Or go to DTM.
They were showing an interview with Max Verstappen as he was leaving the track, and Alex Albon was walking behind with a little suitcase, and it was really sad.
Or was it? I'm sure it was.
It was.
Nigel will now have that on repeat.
Yeah, Nigel's sitting there with Alex Albon's heart in his hand, ready to eat it, just like ha 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 ha.
Give the voodoo doll. Give the voodoo doll a few more stabs. Well, it's quite hard to out-qualify Verstappen when you've got a pin in your right arm.
Shout out to Robert Kubica.
That's got quite dark. Lance Stroll did well, though.
He does have a metalwork in his arm. It's fact.
This opportunity for AlphaTauri. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes,
Lance Stroll
it is. You're right.
Lance Stroll finished 7th, but then got demoted to 8th for passing off Pierre Gasly off the track. And yeah, it was I don't know. What?
Kind of. I
was listening to the radio, so I didn't see anything.
Yes, we did see it, Nigel. He was.
Yes, you did.
I didn't,
because they kind of. They just showed like a car kind of like off track a bit, and it was like, whoa. And then it's like, oh well, okay, Stroll's ahead now. It wasn't shown explicitly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was one of those moments that you completely missed, and you kind of go, did I blink and Stroll past Gasly? Because everyone was passing Gasly at that particular point in time. So it was kind of acceptable, which is why it was, I think, which is why the stewards didn't pick up on it at the time, because he should have served that 5 second, 10 second, or whatever it was in the race. That should have been in race penalty, but I'm not going to rant about the stewards again.
Yeah, it's weird because in Bahrain, didn't they? They swapped to have Verstappen and Hamilton. Why couldn't they just swap it there with Stroll and Gasly? Did they not look at the midfield or something?
No, there's only 4 stewards.
Maybe not. To be fair, they took like 20 odd laps to figure out that Sebastian Vettel hadn't had wheels on his car like 5 minutes before the start, which just seemed really bizarre. You can't.
And that was obvious. They showed it on the formation map. They showed his car there not having wheels on.
Unless they were like putting the wheels on like as it ticked over to 4 minutes 59, like I don't know, but otherwise you kind of think that's pretty straightforward decision to make. So yeah,
dire weekend for Aston Martin though. I mean, Stroll I think actually did a fantastic job to actually get a car anywhere near the points.
I think,
and to be a second off Ricciardo at the end.
Yeah,
that's really good. And the fact that his car was on fire at the start of the race, and that's obviously what forced Vettel to start from the pit lane, meaning they had to take a few gambles with putting him on slicks at awkward times and stuff like that, meant that, you know, one side of the garage just capitulated, obviously, has been woeful, hasn't shown a flash of pace since it started, frankly, from Vettel and Aston Martin. And yeah, it's been a really shoddy weekend. There we go.
Shocking.
But yeah, I don't know if what you guys want to say about sort of Aston Martin pushing for rule changes midway through the season because they want to cause a stir. What the hell is this? Get back in your box.
Yeah, I don't think anything needs to be said there, really. But I think Sebastian Vettel, he could have, if the rumours were to be believed, he could have been partnering Lewis Hamilton this season, but clearly that didn't happen. But yeah,
Rumours to be believed.
Yeah. I mean,
wow, those rumours were started from the bottom. They weren't even.
It was a thing going round. It was, will it be Bottas? Will it be Vettel? Or will it be someone else that I can't think of? I'm not saying there was any truth in them, but it was on certain online forums, rhyming with glitter. Then it was going round. Anyway, yeah, I don't know.
Hitler.
I think Lance Stroll actually had a decent race. I was thinking not many drivers actually had good races when I was looking at my winners for the weekend. It's quite for the race.
Yeah, it's kind of it's really hard. There's because the people
who Ricardo downwards, it's all like
there were some massive losses, which is really what makes it look like Lance Stroll's race was probably better than it was, but it was good, but it probably was just good.
It was good relatively.
Relatively.
That's the thing.
Some people were just not good at all.
I think Stroll was expected, I'd say, and I think it's just a case of Vettel still underperforming by miles. And weirdly, his weekend in Imola was probably better than his weekend in Bahrain, which kind of says how bad.
You too,
because his Imola weekend was still pretty poor. So it's just a question of when/if will Vettel get going, really. And we've done a big podcast on this, which you can look back at from a couple of weeks ago of our good friend Taib, and we basically. Well, I don't want to repeat myself, but you can see it there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting looking at kind of Stroll's and Gasly's weekends, and Gasly's was quite, for one reason or another, it was noticeable, apart from the qualifying getting overshadowed. But then there was the gamble at the start, and then he was, went off a few times and then came back to finish.
If you look at pure driving performance, I think Gasly's in like the top 5, I'd say. Oh, go on.
I was just finishing that off by saying contrasted with Stroll, which was quite quiet, and then he just somehow finishes 7th and then gets demoted. But I think with AlphaTauri, it's such a weird strategy gamble. Like I just don't get it. It was all weird,
but it becomes it. I do get it because at the start of the race, it probably would have it was worthy to be on the wet tyres on the first section of the track, which is where some really tricky parts of the track are. And that was full wet conditions. It's just the back of the track was inter conditions. So if you can survive the inter for a bit, which is what they were benefited by a 6-lap safety car, helped that out to the inter runners. But the wet tyres at that point were all right. But if you go so far and put on inters, then it just becomes you lose even more and you lose even more. And it felt like they were just begging the dry line to be quicker, and that's the thing. Some days that works brilliantly, and some days it doesn't. And today it didn't.
What I would say to that is the teams always try to start on inters, don't they? Because they know that the intermediate time works pretty well in the wet, and it's the tyre to have when the track is getting dry. They unless they're forced to, they don't like to use the wet. So I thought it was weird, like Adam, that some of the teams decided to start their drivers on wet tyres, because I don't, especially with half of the track being bone dry, the wet tyre was just never going to work. So at the time, I thought that was a bit strange too.
It doesn't make sense to go from wets to dries, full wets to dries. I mean, the only race I can remember, exactly, that's the only race I can remember that working is Monaco 2016 with Hamilton. But that was because that worked strategically to get track position and was a really cool strategy move at the time. But with this, it's just it was a gamble that you should try from 20th, not 5th, and they had a car in 20th and they didn't try it on him.
I guess,
which was weird.
I guess the upside is that I don't know, if it does go well, then you've got a chance of potentially taking the lead if all of the drivers ahead of you are on the wrong tyre. So I guess that would go into wider debate of where AlphaTauri see themselves. Do they see themselves as trying to get a solid top 5 spot to give them a good haul of points, or trying to go all out for a win? And I think Tsunoda really kind of, if he'd been around the top 10 or top 12 or whatever, that would have massively benefited them in having that other option that's still kind of near the front or in the top half to be able to mix and match.
And they'll probably they'll be at that point quite soon in the season, having both cars up there. And it is a rare weekend for Yuki Tsunoda where he did crash in qualifying, and he did have
50% of his weekend so far.
What?
50% of his F1 weekend so far, he crashes in qualifying.
Yeah, but
Stat attack.
Let's just see where he goes then. Maybe he'll crash every week. That's definitely not going to happen.
No. And to round out, we have Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Haas, and Nicholas Latifi. So, what? You can each pick one of those to talk about. In fact, I'll take Latifi first, actually.
Whose fault was it, do you think?
That was Latifi's fault.
Yeah, I thought it was Latifi's fault.
Agreed.
But I thought it was a shame that he didn't out-qualify Russell, because he was having a good weekend. And it's kind of
having a fantastic weekend. It was a shame that he spun when he did. Otherwise, he would have been able to probably keep going and probably would have taken the points that Russell lost in that Bottas incident, because Latifi had the pace of Russell on the race pace, definitely. So that was the sad bit for me.
Yeah, because it's not normally been he's looked so solid in practice. If he has been ahead in practice, it's just kind of down to their run plans or whatever. But in this, it did genuinely feel like there was a lot of weight to put on his strong practice runs, and then Russell just pipped him at the end of Q2, and then obviously in the race, then it just didn't come together for him, and he was out on the first lap, which is a big shame for him, because I thought Latifi had it in him to have a good weekend. But
he needs to take it in a similar way needs to go out of this in a similar way to what I said about Perez earlier. He needs to think about how good his start of the weekend was with qualifying and practice performance, not focus on desperation on one little part of the track on the first lap of the race, because that's all it was, to be honest, for Latifi.
Yeah.
He was the most impressed I've been by Latifi since he joined the sport last year, I'd say.
I find that a funny phrase.
Probably agree, to be fair.
That's really mean.
I meant it as a compliment.
I don't know. No, to be fair, I can see where you're going.
From me, it's mean.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You're right. It was impressive. That's the sad thing, is that
Yeah.
He was genuinely faster than Russell until.
He was, and he was doing fantastically. And I really hope he can take this form on, because if he's really, getting to grips now with this performance and work well with Formula One and being at such a peak level of performance, then that's confident for the future of Williams, frankly. Because
maybe. I mean, don't get me wrong. I still think it was a one-off. I think he'll go back to how he was next time. But he's the most impressed I've been with him.
At a driver's track.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed how the red on the Canadian flag is different to the one on the French flag?
Yes. Let's move on to Alpine. I
have a French driver.
Yes, and they're a French team. I have no idea what to make of Alpine's weekend. I think the best bit was when Alonso spun in front of the Bottas Russell crash, because it was really well filmed. And that's it.
It was poor.
Just like, look, there's a crash. Oh, hey, Alonso. And then that was it. Ocon got a point, but cool.
They got a double point score.
Has Alonso been promoted to the points because of Raikkonen's penalty?
Yeah, and Ocon's in 9th.
Oh, good on them. Yeah. Ocon deserves 1.
Well, he got 2.
I think it's worrying that the pace isn't there. I mean, it's good for Ocon that he beat Alonso. It's good confidence booster, and Alonso said it was his fault. He was to blame in qualifying for being half a second away. But I think it's going to be a pretty tough season for Alpine. I don't see much light at the end of the tunnel for this year, at least for them.
I agree. It's kind of difficult to assess. It's whether you think having such a bad weekend and scoring 3 points out of it is good, or for them a really good weekend being scoring 3 points is, you know, such an indictment on where the team's at. So yeah,
I
good
mean,
on
yeah,
them.
17
Good on
cars. 17 cars still finished the race. It's not like it was. I mean,
Two of
it
them
was
were Haas, and one of them was Vettel, who didn't actually finish.
Yeah, that's true, but it's like there's still opportunity. Like you'd still have more chaos up ahead in this kind of race. You'd still not expect it only to be the two Williams and Bottas to be out. Like of cars that should be ahead of the Alpines, it's only Bottas who's out, and so a double points finish as it is now because of the penalties is kind of just it's what it like. In terms of where they should be, and you're right, they should be higher, and they are where they are, which is 9th and 10th, which is kind of like 5th or 6th best team, and that's well, they've had flashes of pace, and that's been about it. And Ocon has had a very good weekend, and I think he actually did do very well in qualifying, specifically to get into Q3 actually. And hopefully they've got a car that they're willing to build on, because they did have a good car last year, and whatever they need to build on, who knows? I know this car's at the end of its cycle because of the way 2019, 2020, 2021 chassis have been carried over, but they can cling to that, but it's not much.
Well, it's quite hard to make a flashing transition from any team to any team, in particular Alpine to Alfa Romeo, but we can introduce it as the pessimism stakes. And it feels like this is kind of the inverse to Alpine, in that they maybe came into this hoping for a bit better weekends, and they're finishing at 13th and 14th. So is it good that they're disappointed, or they might be disappointed, finish 13th or 14th? Or
I think we should explain a bit how they got to 13th and 14th, because they qualified badly. They shouldn't have both been out in Q1, but they were, and that was bad. But through the race, they plucked away at it, and at the restart, they were both in the points. They were, I want to say, 8th and 10th, or maybe better than that, and that was very good for them. That was really good, and it was purely
8th and 9th for one lap.
There we go, 8th and 9th for one lap, and it was purely safety concerns, so they had to bring in Giovinazzi to pit him for to clean his brakes, basically. Raikkonen's obviously been given a hefty penalty, but he still finished on the road in the points. So it seems to be, at least with Giovinazzi, external factors that have like a technical thing that's impacted that. What was Raikkonen's penalty for? It was for something from the start of the race, some technical thing at the start of the race, was it?
Failing to enter the pit lane for the restart of the race.
Stupid penalty. Is absolutely they should be fuming at that. I would be if I was in the team. That is a shocking penalty to get.
What is it? I don't understand.
So is that when he unlapped himself, but he just went onto the track instead of back into the pit lane?
Right.
So, which is kind of mad, because I think, if he was in 8th, then he was the first of those being of those unlapping. So he wouldn't have been going straight back. He might not have known, but
I can't.
It is
he's in the right position, isn't he? He was in the right position for the restart. So
it all righted itself, and he'd spun at one point. But apart from that, that spin is the worst bit of Alfa Romeo's day, and a miscommunication to Kimi Raikkonen at that point clearly is it. So I kind of think they I bet they're really, really kicking themselves, like you say, Nigel. I bet they're really upset, because this was a double points finish on merit for them, really, for the most part. I'd say.
Yeah, I thought Raikkonen drove a great race to hold off the two Alpines, Ocon and Alonso, for as long as he did. I think he had them behind him for about 15, 16 laps at the end. And considering the pace difference, I think Raikkonen used all of his experience to get into that position in the wet. I think his race went completely under the radar, as usual with Kimi Raikkonen. I don't think anyone notices some of his good performances. I think this is one of
No
those
one
cases.
noticed when he won the championship.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if I was Alfa Romeo, I'll be absolutely livid with that penalty, and they thoroughly deserved some points today.
I think, yeah, it's one of those. Is it a sign of progress that they will feel annoyed that they didn't get double points on merit, or will they be more annoyed that they didn't get it in the first place? I don't know, but it just seems to be positive signs from that team moving forward, and at their home race as well, one of their home races.
Yeah, we just got to hope. I mean, they showed very good pace in Bahrain as well, and a few things meant they didn't get points there just out of sheer opportunism from others. So I think there's good chances for more points to come for Alfa Romeo, to be honest. And it's a shame that they haven't got their first points of the year, but at least they deserve them. It's a hard way of looking at it for them, and it's easier said from our perspective.
I just can't believe that penalty.
And there ends the latest episode of the Pessimism Stakes. And finally, Haas qualified last, finished behind a driver that didn't even finish. Anything to say on them? Makes it all right in qualifying. I've got nothing.
They were 2 laps down by lap 25, which is far. Mick Schumacher spun under the safety car. Nikita Mazepin spun at the end. For the most part, they kept it on track, but occasionally didn't and got to the finish line. That is all you can say. You can dissect their pace as much as you like, because Nikita Mazepin was very slow in relation to Mick Schumacher. The gaps were consistently 30 seconds. Yeah. Which is not good. Not good at all. And we've said about Ricciardo as well. It's not good that he was a second lap slower as well. And those are 2 bad performances. But the Haas is the Haas, isn't it?
Certainly is.
It's a hard car to drive at the best of times, and I don't really know what conclusions we can draw from that. Apart from the fact that they're both rookies and they both dropped it once again in a race. So we got to the end. Hooray. 2 cars at the flag. Yeah, I was speaking just for the sake of speaking, to be honest.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add on that, Adam.
I think speaking for the sake of speaking is all you can do when you're talking about Haas. But I think that concludes our roundup. The only 2 things I'd like to point out are that Perez and Raikkonen both have underappreciated accents on their names, because I think they should be, Perez and Raikkonen should both have accented 3-driver acronyms, but they don't, which I think is.
I'm too tired to think about this, Adam.
Mazepin took a precautionary gearbox change after FP1. I've got that noted down. Don't have anything else.
Oh, that's all right, because they have practice gearboxes anyway.
Yeah. Oh, James Vowles was. I'm just going to. I've started making notes through the weekend on my phone. James Vowles was nice to Lewis. Picked him back up because he looked properly down after his in the red flag period, and then there was a nice conversation between Lewis and James Vowles, and that seemed to really invigorate Hamilton. Which is it was a really he clearly picked himself up. He went away, did his thing, sat down, listened to his music, went back to his trailer, just got himself back in the zone in a really brilliant way to Lewis. I think that's something that's incredibly difficult for any sports person to do. And finally, 2 stats. Alonso is out-qualified by his teammate for the first time in 27 Grand Prix. And Vettel has now not reached Q3 in the last 15 races. So
is that 27 Grand Prix that Alonso's competed in, or just 27 Grand Prix?
I assume that he's competed in.
Because that makes it even more. So, fair play.
Yeah.
If he adds the 45 or so in 2019 and 20, that's now 70 plus Grand Prix. So fair play to Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, that'll probably drop him midway through 2019. So yeah, he probably didn't get out qualified for a race that he wasn't even racing in. Although I guess he did, because he didn't qualify DNQ. Anyway, we are rambling, and that signals the end of the Imola review. Overall, absolutely quality race. A classic,
really enjoyed it.
I think, like we said last week with Bahrain, it was the best season opener. I think we've had the best first two races of the season for a long time, which is
two of the
fantastic.
best qualifying sessions in a row that I can remember as well. I think the qualifying was absolutely unbelievable this weekend. I absolutely adored that session.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm absolutely shattered now.
Same. It is stressful, and I've got a very stressful week coming up. But in that week, we will be bringing you another podcast. We'll also have me and Freddie's final to the quiz that happened last week, and we didn't finish it, and we meant to do it this week, but then there was actually a good race at Imola.
Don't check that out. It was it's kind of funny. I found it quite funny.
I think chaotic. There's some good F1 chat as well before that, and during the quiz actually, some quite nerdy
there
F1
was
chat. And
really
Portsmouth coming up next, which I'm excited about, because that's again another different track to what we've had so far, and we'll discuss that more.
I had a good race for MotoGP today in Portimao.
Yeah, check out Last Lap for more coverage on that. Adam Proud, big up, and Taib.
They did a fantastic job this weekend.
But
yes, thank you everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone for watching or listening, or just for contributing in some way to F1. Bye.